Well, happy whatever day this is that you're watching us. This is Richard Rosen, Winnipeg's friendliest undertaker. As many of you know, I've been running a series of interviews on a various number of topics in the death care and estate industries to increase death literacy, topics such as green burial and digital assets, to name just a few. Now, as a funeral director, you can only imagine that it's really quite uncomfortable sometimes to be able to talk to people about their own planning and finding a way to do that in a good, upbeat, and a positive way. Maybe I'll start about talking about, we both like to canoe, but to steer the conversation back into things that are important and relevant and timely for everybody is technology, because all of our lives are impacted every single moment. And that seems to be a good place to start. And it's also where we're going with our conversations here today. Our goal with all of the digital information sessions that we're holding is to raise your level of awareness and to really talk about the importance of considering your digital life when you're estate planning. This is the disclaimer, okay? I should have a little banner underneath that says disclaimer. We're not providing advice, and this really isn't a substitution for advice. We really encourage you that you seek qualified professional advice in the jurisdiction that you're in. And because we're delving into the world of technologies, we're going to be mentioning vendors and service providers to illustrate points. It's really not to endorse any particular organization, product, or service. My co-host today is Sharon Hartung. Sharon and I have worked together quite often, and she is the author of Your Digital Undertaker. And she and I are going to be interviewing Lee Poskanzer. He is the CEO and founder of Directive Communications Systems. And DCS is the first and only estate management solution, assisting attorneys and personal representatives to organize and contact personal accounts to fulfill an individual's final wishes. So with that, Sharon, welcome back. And Lee, thank you very much for joining us. I'll turn this over to Sharon.
Thanks so much, Richard, for the introduction, and terrific to be on with Lee, although I know Richard had to prep us. When Lee and I get onto a phone call and get chatting, time passes quickly. So we're going to stay focused today. That just means that Lee and I both are working in the digitization of the estate industry space, and there's a lot of interesting and wonderful things coming to support clients, advisors, and organizations. So we get to talk about one of those tech entrepreneurs today, someone who actually has been around the digital vault space for a while with Lee. And so let me just kick off, Lee. How did you come to launch your company? When and why?
Well, first, let me say thank you, Richard and Sharon, for having me on today. Directive Communication Systems, from here on we'll call DCS, started because I had a friend pass away back in 2013. I had worked with him for years in the financial area. And when he died in April of 2013, it was very sudden, it was very unexpected. And a few months later, I was on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn wanted me to congratulate him on being a volunteer ski instructor back in New England. And I was about to call Jim and congratulate him and say, hey, well, I see you on the slopes soon. And unfortunately, as I'm dialing the number, I'm realizing Jim's not going to pick up, but his wife or his two children will. And it really took me back, because here it is, his profile is as if he's alive. It's a celebratory moment, and something's wrong. I started looking into it, who takes care of these matters? Digital assets are new. Didn't even know the term digital asset at the time. I just knew it was LinkedIn, and wanted to know, why was Jim's profile still up on LinkedIn, Facebook, and several other websites at the time. So I started doing research with lawyers, with wealth managers, accountants, and clients themselves, and come to find out, not only is no one handling the social media, but lawyers are now losing financial matter that are costing the estates time, money, and energy. And so I thought there was a real opportunity to create something that could help solve the problem, both from a financial point of view, from an efficiency point of view, and from an emotional point of view. And we launched in 2016, and have been in market ever since.
Wow. Well, thank you, Lee, for sharing your personal story. And it's just so mesmerizing to see how passionate you are about it. And when you understand where it came from and dealing with a friend, it makes sense in terms of how you poured your heart and soul into the company. So thank you for sharing that. So let's shift now to talking very specifically about your solution itself as a platform and the offerings. How does it work? Who's your target audience or market? Just give us a little more sort of a user perspective of your solution.
Sure. I would be remiss if I didn't give a little bit of history on how the company came to be. So as I started developing the service, I became involved with uh, different aspects of the legal tech community, and in particular the trust and estates area, and started speaking with lawyers who are on the Uniform Law Commission, dealing with digital assets and fiduciary access as they were experiencing new problems and they were understanding that the future was only going to get worse. But I also met with several of the leading tech companies, Facebook, AOL, Google, as well as a public policy firm in Washington. And through those relationships and understanding of what the expectations were on both sides of the fence, because we can't just look at what do the trust and estates lawyers and their clients need, but the content providers themselves also have to go through a process when someone passes away. And when I looked at building our platform and its development, we wanted to settle both sides so that transference of assets would be smooth and easy and not cumbersome and bulky and everybody trying to figure out what to do. So as we realized what we needed to do, we recognized the need for identifying the account holder and tying them to the decedent, tying the estate to the decedent and the account holder, tying the account itself to the account holder and their ID, and then wrapping it all around a directive. And so our platform records through technology the various identifying information requirements, the directive requirements. We understand the submission methods of each content provider. So some will take email, some will take snail mail, other ones will do an upload of information. And we understand all of that. So we help in the planning process so that when the client makes their decisions, it's in compliance with those content providers. But then when it comes time to do the administration, we know the package that they're looking for. So we compile all the documentation, we compile the data along with the logs of decision making, and we submit it in the preferred method of that custodian or content provider, which is why we're so effective in what we do. We're meeting them on their terms, and we're able to get them to respond because there's no risk for them. There's no concerns. And their biggest concern is privacy breach or release of information, not only because they want to protect their policy and their account holder, but there are several laws that can penalize them if they don't adhere to their own policy.
Yeah, so you started at the strategic level, which is the intersection of the law, the intersection of technology, the intersection of the estate industry, and I know you have some wonderful people on your team that are leaders in that space, as you are yourself, like Jason Mosley, who is not only a lawyer but understands process improvement and Six Sigma, because as we take technology and apply it to a business process, we're going to have to innovate and rethink the business processes along the way. So down into the weeds, let's turn now a little bit to the context that the estate industry will understand, which is estate planning versus incapacity planning versus estate administration. So you're specifically talking here about a digital asset, which I've often called your memory, your money, or your records, something we've never had to transfer before in an estate context, like social media, like our social media accounts, our web domains, potentially even our unregulated cryptocurrencies, depending on where that goes. So why don't you take us a little bit through just the practicality of it? If someone has several digital assets, maybe give us an example of what happens during the estate administration versus estate planning side of it as you use your solution?
Sure. Uh, if it's okay with you, we'll start with the planning side of our service. One of, well, let me take a step back. Security and privacy are critical. And if an organization isn't protecting the data of its users, the liability and risk, particularly in this area, is quite high. We're talking about estates in the millions, potentially billions of dollars, and you really want to protect that. So one of the things that we do immediately is we never take passwords. So when a person's planning their accounts, we don't actually have access to the contents of that account or to the account itself. We only know the account exists and what's to be done with it. So we never touch those passwords. We never have them. We never bring them into the platform.
Now, before you go on, let me just comment on that, because that's a significant point that most people don't truly understand, is if you have a social media account, the username that you may have selected for that account may not even look like your real name. It could be, your pet's name. It could be anything in terms of what it is. So the fact that you have that particular account and that you have a username associated to it are pretty critical pieces of information, because most people think, well, I need the password. No, you don't. The username, what platform that particular account is on. I just wanted to pull that out a little bit, Lee, because a lot of people don't understand the significance of even that information.
No, that's a critical point, right? That goes with the account holder identification. Right. And let's just take that one step further. So if you have a username on Facebook and it's anything similar or repetitive, like Bob Jones, Facebook may not know that Bob Jones on Main Street in Toronto is the same Bob Jones on West Street in Toronto.
Right.
And so how does Facebook protect the identity if they don't know, and the estate cannot provide any evidence identifying that specific individual? So yes, username is just as critical as not using a password. And in fact, most custodians prohibit the use of passwords once the individual passes away, because then it becomes account holder impersonation. And that opens up liability financially as well as reputationally. So they don't want any part of it. So anybody who recommends password sharing that might have worked in the past, basically because it was the Wild West and it's an older generation. But as we look at younger generations who are more dependent on the internet and they have a lot more to risk, and with the fiduciary access laws being passed all over the world, actually, you're looking at more enforcement of password sharing prevention. So it's a great point. You have to have the username, you have to have the right information in order to get access. For example, I also have 7 email addresses that I use for different purposes, and those tend to be my username. So I have to be able to make sure that the right email address is associated with the right account in order for my wife to get access to contents. And that doesn't mean she's going to get into the account. It just simply means that data is going to be dumped into a cloud-based server or on a drive, and she'll have a limited time access to get to it, limited time period to access the information. So it's not a very easy thing to do. And we've just started this conversation.
Right. So let me bring us back then to the platform level. So let's suppose that you have an individual. I know that you tend to serve B2B, which is law firms and large organizations in this space, but you also serve the B2C. So if I'm a client and I decide to sign up for your platform, I would obviously create a profile. And what would be some of the things that the platform would allow me to do?
So I'm going to take that from 2 levels, because there's the lawyer visibility and access, as well as the client's access. So from the lawyer perspective, the clients are enrolled through the law firm. We are, one would imagine, which would be name, address, phone number, email address, things of that nature. but we also gather the fiduciary. So that way we know who can activate our service. Without having that, if just the brother of the deceased calls and they have nothing to do with the estate, the risk of starting communications and closing accounts is too high. And they may have nefarious reasons why they're doing it. So we get the fiduciary as well and their contact information. In our platform, that is the one area that the client cannot change. That's either the lawyer has to change it because they're going to have to change the fiduciary in the estate documents, or the client will submit to us in written form the change that has been made to their estate documents if there's one, and we will make that change. Once the client is enrolled with us, we then begin to communicate with the client. They have an enrollment wizard that sets up default directives, and we have 2 directives that we worry about. We have the information disclosure directive, as well as the action-oriented directive, which is the closing of the account, deletion of the account, transference, remove the name from the family share plan, as well as some that may say memorialize the account. So they'll set up a set of default directives, and then we start an education campaign so that the client knows exactly why they're doing it. And we educate them on how to enter accounts into the portfolio. We offer 3 ways to do it. One is for the client to simply fill in the fields, sit in front of the computer, and enter the data. The second is if they have a cheat sheet with the URL, their username, maybe some account numbers that are appropriate, some other information that may be appropriate, but not the password. They can upload that to us, and we will populate their portfolio for them. And then they can come in at a later time and make decisions as they see fit for account level reasons. Lastly, we have a browser extension that captures accounts on the fly. So as a client's enrolling or logging in, if it's not already part of their portfolio, we will ask them right then and there, do they want to add that account into their portfolio? And they can say yes, no, or not now. Based on that decision, we can deposit the account. We can make them ignore it, so it's never going to be part of it, or they can revisit it because it may be an account that they're going to decide on whether it's part of their portfolio. In any instance, we have the data logs that demonstrate to the custodian where decisions are made and why they are now part of that portfolio. So from the planning perspective, it could take, we'll stay with them for the duration of their lives. They'll continuously add new accounts as they proceed. We also do devices. If anybody remembers the San Bernardino bomber, the US government attempted to get Apple to open up the iPhone, and Apple said no, because they didn't have account holder intent. With our service, we have the account holder's declaration on what they want to do with that device and who gets to see what apps. So that way we can open up devices as well. During the planning phase, our clients have the ability to go to what we call the resource center, which is educational materials, videos, chat, all of that is available. And if we catch wind where a website owner or app owner has changed their options for account holder death, we then reach out to the account holder, excuse me, and then inform them there's a new option at Twitter. You can now memorialize, and giving them the information to decide for themselves what they want to do.
That's neat. That's neat. Okay, so let me see if I can summarize this because it's a lot to take in. So on the B2B side, you predominantly have clients that are law firms or estate firms. They would sign up on the platform, and then they would offer access to the platform for individual clients who have individual access to it. An individual client would have a named fiduciary and law firm, which cannot be changed, which is because it's set up at the front end. So that does provide some privacy protection down the road if someone gets access to an individual's access. The individual themselves, the planner, the testator, the will maker, would provide information into the vault, like the fact that they have a social media account or an email account or whatever other digital asset they have. You have tabs that allow for them to provide additional information about that individual digital asset, including directives. For most people, we don't understand what directives are. Directives are your wishes or your preferences or what you want done with the content in the estate planning context. And then I think things unfold on the estate administration side, which we'll talk about in part 2. So with that, I think we should end our part 1.
I,
Absolutely fascinating. Anything you want to add, Lee?
yeah, sure, if that's okay. One of the things that our platform does on the planning side is it gives the opportunity for the client to instruct on accounts that most executors will overlook. Most
Oh, okay.
executors won't look at Dropbox. They'll like, okay, that's just
Right.
files. Or they'll overlook domain names. And they
Right.
don't realize that there's financial value to those accounts. What we offer is the ability for that client to leave a message and to indicate that those accounts that executors typically ignore, that it's financial matter and that it needs to be settled with the estate. They can instruct, for example, that Dropbox has stock certificates, or that they're writing a book and there's been an advance made, or in the case of Google, that there's financial statements in emails that need to be vetted. So we don't just have the account, but we give the opportunity to identify what's in that account, so we can say, yep, there's an avatar in Fortnite, and I paid $30,000 for it, so let's try, the estate needs to sell it. So the planning is critical. And I can't stress that enough, that most people don't realize until it's too late, that planning, even for e-commerce sites like Amazon and Home Depot, they need to be considered because they have SKUs for home renovations, warranties, and things of that nature. So we give the opportunity to lead the estate to where they need to go to find information.
So estate tech to manage our tech will be the first generation to transfer digital assets. So there's lots new to learn, and it's wonderful that there are technological solutions emerging here. Now, importantly, where can people find a demo of your solution, and how can they reach out and contact you if they'd like to hear more?
Sure. We have multiple ways to reach out to us. If you visit Directive Communications, plural.com, there's a lot of information there about our services, both for the lawyer or even wealth manager, as well as their clients. You can also find information for you as an individual if you don't have a professional advisor. So there's enough information for both sides. You can also reach us at info@directivecommunications.com, or call us at 1-800-372-8121. Again, 800-372-8121. Now I feel like I'm an infomercial there. Call today.
It's okay.
And you'll get a Ginsu knife. But we have multiple ways. We have chats also available. We have webinars that people can learn and see a demo. And we can also schedule personalized demos for those that are looking for it.
You're also on LinkedIn and Twitter as well?
Yes, we're on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can reach us through those through social media as well.
Fantastically. It's always terrific catching up with you and talking on the digital asset topic. There's easy ways to start, and then there's some more complex things that the industry needs to evolve and address, which is wonderful to have the conversation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Richard, who's generously brought us together so that we can have these conversations and share our information with everyone.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. And thank you, Lee. That was, when you mentioned about the number of email accounts that you have, I'm in the same boat as you. I've got more than one for more than one thing. And to be able to know that they need to be taken care of and somebody needs to know is really important. I think the other thing that you mentioned was the customer side that you have, and not just the business to business relationships that you have, but a customer isn't just the average individual. It's also small business or business owners, because you mentioned domain names. And for my funeral home, I have several domain names that I have purchased. So they do have a monetary value, and business owners need to know who actually owns those things or who oversees them. Sometimes it's a third party that your IT company might be working through. So you need to know those things, because if something does happen to your business, you need to be aware of what those things are and how to take care of them in a good way. So for all those small business and business owners out there, this is for you too. It's not just for the average individual, it's for all of us, and more probably especially for us that take care of clients, because we are keeping information and we have to make sure that it's protected. So with that, I thank Sharon again for being a co-host. Lee, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate everybody's comments when we're doing these interviews. We really appreciate your questions. So with that, keep safe and keep smiling. This is Richard Rosen, Winnipeg's friendliest undertaker, signing off.